lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Hello, horror hounds, and welcome to Now Slaying, an It Slays podcast production where we break down the latest and greatest in the world of horror. I'm your not-so-humble host, Colton.
And I am the humblest of humble hosts, Rowan.
And today on the show, we're going to be reviewing Morbius, which was released today, April 1st, 2022.
Oh, yeah,
exclusively
baby.
in theaters. We're all very excited to get into Morbius around these parts. But before we get into discussion, we made some mistakes last episode. We have some sins to atone for, and I think you potentially sinned a little bit more than myself, Rowan, so how about you kick it off?
Yeah, so, with me, I said Ty West for X, that he's a writer-producer for You're Next. And, sadly, what I was thinking of is that he's actually in it. I didn't even give him the credit he deserved as an actor.
He's one of, like, the main actors in the movie, isn't he?
Yeah, I think he's, like, the brother or the girlfriend's boyfriend or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't give him the credit. I apologize, Ty West. I think we've already learned that I'm not super familiar with your work, so I'm taking...
Please forgive us.
Yeah, forgive us, please.
Yeah, I also made a little mistake saying that In a Valley of Violence, his Western movie, I think I said it was like 2.5 hours long, or maybe even 2 hours and 45 minutes long. Essentially, I said it's really long when it's only an hour 44. So I don't want to do Ty West dirty like that. I don't want to make it seem like his movies are overly boring or overly long, because an hour and 44 minutes, that's a good length. That's like Morbius length. So, it can't be too bad. So I hope, dear listeners, I hope you'll forgive us. We'll do better. And
hopefully Ty West goes and sees Morbius and does better too. Hopefully he learns that Marvel's got the formula.
I mean, Morbius, I think, is a healing experience for everyone. I think it's a religious experience in some ways. So, I before we get into the discussion of actually the Morbius movie, I figured I'd kind of ask you about, do you have any background on this superhero or this anti-hero or whatever, on the character of Morbius?
Yeah, I do a bit. I feel my start off with Morbius, probably the same as most people, is from, the classic 90s animated series. Michael Morbius was like a pretty large character.
Okay.
In that series, like, they did the whole original story arc of him. His first appearance is Amazing Spider-Man 101. So, it is an older character. That's, I'm not that nerdy that I can't say the year. I feel like 101 is probably in the 70s or early 80s, I would assume. I'm saying 70s. So, like, he is an older character. Obviously, when he first came out, he was kind of an anti-hero, sympathetic villain. I'm most familiar with him, so in 2013, I was really heavy in the buying, like, single issue comics.
Okay.
And they had actually, like, announced, like, we're doing a Morbius the Living Vampire solo series. And obviously, being a horror guy, I'm like, oh, this looks kind of cool. Like, I didn't know much about the character. So, I picked it up from issue 1. It wasn't very long. It got canceled after 9 issues.
Okay.
He's not a popular character, I don't think, necessarily. Early 90s, he was part of a group called Midnight Sun that was like, I think they were Midnight Sun, something like that. It was basically like him, Ghost Rider.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think they're doing a video game on that group now.
Yeah,
so.
Basically all those kind of horror, Werewolf by Night, like horror characters. And I remember, it's been a long, long time since it's been 2013 since I read those. I brushed up, I read the last issue of the series today, and I kind of was like reading the synopsis, trying to remember it of each issue, and I remember at the time when I read them, I really liked them, and I was like, oh man, like, and then we just never got any more Morbius ever, so.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I'm somewhat familiar.
Yeah, I'm not very familiar with him. I knew of the name. I knew he was like a Spider-Man villain. I just Googled. Apparently his first appearance was 1963, so.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, he's a little bit more of an OG villain for sure. I knew about like his subtitle, The Living Vampire, and I mean, that's basically my knowledge of Morbius. Absolutely no knowledge getting into this other than I saw that everybody was saying, I'm not really sure why they'd pick Morbius out of all the different Spider-Man villains to make a solo movie on. And I mean, we'll get more into that in a little bit, but yeah, not very familiar with the character.
As I feel most probably aren't.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, other than for the last 2 years, we've been getting nonstop trailers before every single movie, I think, in theaters that I was privileged to see. So the original release date for this movie was July 10th, 2020. Yeah. So it's been a long time coming. And with that prolonged marketing cycle, were you looking forward to checking this out in the theaters?
I mean, my interest was piqued. Obviously, like I said, what I read of the character, I was interested. I'm always interested on, especially from the trailer, I didn't know what to expect. I had kind of thought, after New Mutants, I was like, maybe we're going to get like a little more of a horror take again.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I was a lot kinder to New Mutants than most people. Like, I think that, New Mutants, the swing, it was technically a swing and a miss, but, I appreciate the swing taken to try to make a horror movie.
Yeah, I didn't hate that movie. I didn't give it like a 1 out of 5 on Letterboxd or anything. I'm not gonna say it's a good movie, but it's not the worst.
I mean, I'm also not a giant piece of shit that cares that like two women kiss each other in a movie. So,
oh my god, no.
But so I just didn't know what they were taking from the comics. Like I said, when I had read this in 2013, they gave Morbius a real like Netflix Daredevil feel. Like he was a street level character. Like in that series, his villains were like the mob and like
okay, yeah, different than this one.
Yeah, like the book kind of was dealing with like gentrification. He lived in like an actual place, Brownsville, New York. It was dealing with those kind of themes. So I didn't know. I was like, oh, maybe they're gonna try to make this like a street level character. The coloring kind of interested me because in the trailers we see in the trailer they had it kind of like when he's swiping people's necks. Kind of give me a Harley Quinn Birds of Prey feel where it looked like the blood was going to be like weird coloring and there was just like purples.
A lot of like reds and purples and in the trailer, yeah.
So I was intrigued. I was like, I'm interested to see what this is like. So yeah, I was intrigued. What about you?
Well, I was not looking forward to this. I'm on the complete opposite of Rowan. I thought this movie has looked like garbage ever since the very first time it was shown, and I'm just really not a fan of the Sony universe whatsoever. Like, I hate Venom 1 and 2. Like, so it's essentially like it's bad for the film industry, but I kind of just want Sony to kind of fail with these Marvel adaptations and get the rights back to Disney, even though it's like Disney owns everything. But it's just like I don't know. I'd rather some better movies. So I was not looking forward to it. I was actually not going to go see this in theaters. It's what is going to be one of the very few movies I don't go see in theaters, just because, like I said, I don't want to support that shitty universe. I'd rather something better. But Rowan twisted my arm. He said he'd do the show all alone if I didn't go see it. So for the betterment of the show,
no one wanted that. So.
I went to go see it for a couple hours. So, but with that, I think it's probably best we'll throw it over to the trailer and we'll hop into the review discussion.
What would you do if you could be normal?
I would find a cure for us.
After years, it's finally possible.
You did it. You found a cure.
No, Milo. It's a curse.
What happened to you?
Something inside of me wants to hunt. You can't stay here. It's not safe.
Michael, this is your chance to set things right.
Are you here to heal the world or to destroy it?
I don't know.
Morbius, a new Marvel legend, arrives only in theaters. Rated PG-13.
All right, what you just heard was from the movie Morbius, directed by Daniel Espinosa and written by Matt Sazama and Burt Sharpless. And the story is as follows. Affected by a rare blood disorder that requires multiple transfusions a day, Dr. Michael Morbius develops and undergoes a radical form of treatment that requires combining one's own DNA with that of vampire bats. What at first appears to be a radical success soon reveals itself to be a remedy, potentially worse than the disease itself. Rowan, here on Now Slaying, we try and keep things relatively spoiler-free up front. So, what are your spoiler-free thoughts on Morbius?
Probably my first spoiler-free thing, which, I mean, anyone that knows me knows I look for. Not as colorful as the trailer gave us, I feel.
No.
I feel the
Not
trailers
at all.
were far more colorful. Yeah, I mean, the length. I was actually kind of pleased with the length.
Okay.
It's a little refreshing, anything that has anything to do with Marvel's name, that I'm not sitting there for 3 hours.
Yeah, I mean, an hour 44 is pretty short for a superhero movie nowadays, especially after like the Batman and Spider-Man.
Yeah, well, and Jesus, after if this was the Eternals, we'd only be
Oh
done
my
like
God.
the first character's backstory in an hour.
I forgot
and
all
44.
about that. I've been trying to block that movie out.
I would say my big thing, which I can get into now, and I'll get into more in the spoiler area. I think if anyone was kind of curious, I'm thinking maybe if you had like younger kids or anything, like you wanted to see it, and you're maybe wondering like horror themes and stuff, like you can definitely take them to this.
It's pretty tame. I mean, I wouldn't say like bring like your 5-year-old to go see it, but it's not an R-rated
Colton would
movie.
say that. I'd say bring your 2-year-old.
I don't think this is like very frightening, and it's definitely not an R-rated movie. It's for a
No.
vampire movie, it's actually relatively bloodless, so that was a little bit surprising to me for sure.
I will say another thing too is I was kind of surprised, actually very surprised after, I think the proper things done with Spider-Man and everyone loving those. I was really surprised at how dated this felt.
This felt like straight out of like the mid 2000s era to me.
Yeah, like I kind of was getting like Edward Norton, Incredible Hulk, like beginning of MCU feel. It felt like maybe a CG rush job, which I don't really understand because you had 2
After
years.
2 years? Yeah.
Yeah, like stuff like that definitely was very questionable in 2022. And not to say there's not other, offenders of this in recent history. Like a lot of the issues I had, like when Black Panther came out, were kind of this issue also.
Yeah, it's perhaps a little bit more egregious over the last couple of years in the COVID era. Like we're getting a lot of movies with really bad CGI.
Yeah.
I kind of wonder, is that a work from home thing? Is it like, kind of having to diversify and send the work all across the world instead of just one office? I have no clue, but we're getting loads of movies with bad CGI, and this is another offender.
My thing with it is kind of like, I think about last night I finally watched the Resident Evil movie, like the new one.
Yeah.
Which, when that came out, that was a big thing. Like, the CG looks terrible. And I remember seeing the trailers being like, the CG looks terrible. But, like, when I watched that, I was kind of like, you know what? Like, I kind of give it a pass. Like, it is what it is. The movie knew what it was. Whereas this is like, Sony's kind of telling you, like, this is another character that, we're probably going to try to give other movies and, blah, blah, blah. And it just, after Venom, I still haven't watched the second Venom movie, but there's like that little ounce of heart and care that I feel like Sony just like is missing, where Sony's just like churning out these films, and it's kind of like, oh, like they look whatever, the stories are whatever, but we're giving you content, so whatever. What did you think about it?
Yeah, I'm pretty much on the same vein. I don't think this is actually like the worst like superhero movie either.
No.
Which in a way I'm a little bit disappointed, because all the memes going around and like the 15% on Rotten Tomatoes and stuff, it had me kind of excited for an absolute dumpster fire that we just like, be like laughing at for like 40 minutes. It's a little bit more in the like, it is really bad, but there is a couple of very small redeeming qualities about the movie that prevent it from being an absolute like trash tier for me. Like, I did think like Matt Smith was pretty good in terms of like his really like over the top like charismatic villain. Like, he was a really good contrast to like Jared Leto. I thought like Jared Leto, this whole movie is like pretty sleepy, and I don't know, I feel like he's just trying to be almost like badass or cool the entire movie, which whenever you kind of feel a character trying to be that and not just embodying it, it comes off as like a little bit cringy. Whereas whenever Matt Smith would show up, be like, oh, he's having a fun time in this movie, like he's chewing up the scenery and being like a weird villain. I completely agree with like what you say with the visual effects. I think by and large a lot of them are very bad. There's this effect they kind of like make everything look smoky around when he's moving, and I was like, what does that have to do with like vampirism or bats? Like I was very confused. I'm not sure why they chose to do that. It looked good at times when they do the slow-mo, which they use a lot in this movie. It's like they'd kind of slow down and be like, look at all these smoke effects, and I'd be like, okay, they look pretty good. but like the focus of the image, which is like, I don't know, someone's face or a hand swiping or something, looks like garbage. So it's weird. It's just like, yeah, it's almost like the particle effects or smoke effects were pretty good for the movie.
Yeah.
I think like by and large, like the pacing is pretty bad. I thought we were honestly, the movie was almost over when Matt Smith shows up and there's gonna be like a confrontation in like a subway station, you know, without spoiling anything. I was like, okay, this almost feels like a third act climax to me. And I was like, you know, he just showed up probably 10 minutes earlier, but knowing this movie had such poor reviews, I was like, I mean, 10 or 15 minutes for the villain, whatever, you know, that makes sense. But then I still had like another 40 minutes after that point, and man, oh man, that's when the movie started to drag for me quite a bit. So yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't recommend this movie if you're listening to this discussion to get probably like an all-out dunking on it. Like, I'm not as angry at this movie as I was for like Malignant, say. And I'm not saying this is a better movie than Malignant. I'm just saying Malignant, I had much higher hopes and was far more disappointed. Where this, I went in kind of expecting like absolute garbage, and I was like, okay, it's pretty bad. It's not the worst superhero movie I've even seen in the last probably like 5 years though. So it's just bad, you know? So no, I wouldn't recommend it, but has a couple of little small qualities that are like good to okay.
I was gonna say, like, I'd recommend it, like, obviously, you know, if you're like me, you go see all the comic book movies, and you probably could do worst with an hour and 40 whatever minutes. To me, I feel like this is probably a more, like, you could probably wait till this hits Disney Plus or something.
Oh yeah, I do not think you need to go see this in theaters. Like I said, I don't really recommend it anyways, but if you're listening to this anyways, you're a comic book fan, like Rowan said, you're gonna see it anyways, like, yeah, like, do what I did. If you're gonna go see it in theaters, use your like your scene points or use your like free movie pass or whatever to go check this one out. You don't have to spend $20 to see it.
If you went and saw the Eternals, you can go see this. So
well, and that's kind of what I'm saying. Like it's so weird because like I can point to like multiple movies and like I do like this better than the Eternals. So that's the thing. It's like I don't think the Eternals has a 15% on Rotten Tomatoes, but like when I walked out of the Eternals, I was like, oh, that's an easy like 1.5 out of 5 on like my letterbox scale. I was like, easy. Like I hated that. Where this is like, oh, there's some things I didn't hate. So maybe we'll save those for the spoiler discussion. Maybe we should just hop into that discussion to kind of discuss the movie in greater detail. But yeah, it's funny to say like, oh, I was slightly surprised the movie wasn't absolutely atrocious. But yeah, if you're away from the phone, if you're driving down the road, I don't think we have a spoiler bumper song yet. So now's the time. We're going to be getting into spoilers for Morbius.
I mean, we kind of spoiled it in the non-spoiler. What's his name? Matt Smith. Fucking awesome. Man, he's on a run right now. He's loving.
Yeah, he's good.
Loving blockbuster movie life.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of like taken like a villainous approach here lately because I remember from Last Night in Soho. He was pretty good in that movie, even though I wasn't the biggest fan of that movie. And it's just like he just seems to be enjoying the roles he's taking, even if he's not in like great movies. Because like obviously, it's like most people would probably advise not to take the 15% on Rotten Tomatoes role. But in a way, I kind of like, if you are overshadowing an Oscar winner in this 15% on Rotten Tomatoes role and are probably the one redeeming aspect of the movie, I can kind of see the argument to basically be like, yeah, I mean, I don't know why that would hurt your career if you're the best part of a bad movie.
I thought super charismatic. And I mean, I could see where they thought it was going to be a good play. Like I said, like, Morbius is a difficult character. So from like, you know, the animated series, like, Morbius is a pretty intense character that I see what Leto was trying to do. Once his reinvention in 2013, like, he is kind of just like a brooding, hoodie over his head character. This is where, like, I just, kind of like you said, I wish Disney had the rights. He's meant to be in that Netflix street level world where you could have made it harder. It could have been brutal. I mean, because that's really where the struggle is in the comics, which we get in this. Like, the struggle is I'm a vampire and I need human blood. But, you know, this movie, I just felt this movie really danced around that because we needed to be a PG movie.
Yeah, I felt that as well. It's just, like, clearly they wanted to kind of have a lot of horror DNA in it, and that's why we're reviewing it on the podcast, right?
Yeah.
It's a vampire horror, well, superhero movie that we thought would have a lot of horror DNA, but as a PG-13 movie, like, honestly, I don't even really know too many horror scenes in in the movie. I guess there's that one scene in the hospital hallway where the lights keep turning off as he's going after the nurse, which I think is like the one innocent person he kills in the movie, and kind of says a thing about like how she has
he didn't
single
kill
mother.
her. He didn't kill her.
He didn't kill her? That was Matt Smith?
That was Matt Smith, because Matt Smith admits to it later.
Oh my God, dude.
Says that it was him that killed her.
Oh my God, the layers upon layers of this movie. I completely missed that. I thought that was Jared Leto. Man, oh man. All right, well, but that scene is the one scene that I go like, okay, they were going for something horror here, because it does have like the jump scare of her dying at the end that is obviously like super telegraphed. But there's so many scenes in this movie where there's just bloodless kills, or like they do these camera movements so you can't really focus on anything that's happening. So it's like, I don't know, someone will get slashed across the face with 5 fingers with extended claws on, and like obviously their face should be pretty gnarly, but it's just like the way the camera moves, you don't really see anything at all. So any parts of the movie where there's going to be blood and gore, it's completely it's a there's nothing there. It's a non-starter. Like they keep talking about how bloody these things are, how all these bodies are, all the blood is missing from them, but we don't see like blood too often in the movie outside of, I think it's Jared Harris's character when he dies in the third act. Like he's kind of cut up, but like I think like he's one of the very few characters that have a lot of blood on them.
I think the real miss with this was, this is a comic book movie first, attempted a horror movie second, where like I said, I think a win for this would have been horror movie first, comic book movie second. It was kind of like the gimmicks that I didn't really enjoy, such as, so when we get Jared Leto kind of first turning into Michael Morbius, I mean, as someone that is a fan of the character, I'm like, fuck yeah. I'm like, awesome. Like, I thought looked cool. Now, if you're familiar with Michael Morbius in like the comics, Michael Morbius doesn't change back to a human. He's just looks like that, which is one of the struggles of being Michael Morbius, which is why Michael Morbius has this relentless want to change himself back. He doesn't want to look horrific. He wants his life back.
Oh, that wasn't in this movie at all. I never got that at all. It was just like he was constantly like happy in a way to be away from his old body and his old life and be into this like stronger body.
Yeah.
I didn't get that at all. Actually, like one of my things with the movie was I kind of wish like there was basically no prosthetics, but I mean like when he transformed fully, I was wishing that it was more like defined stages of transformation. Like we knew like how far he was gone, because he makes a reference at some point, like he doesn't want to be like Matt Smith's character. I forget the name of now. Yeah, like Milo or Lucian, I think, or something. He doesn't want to go as far as him, right? But I'm like, bro, you already look like him in this scene that you're talking about. Like, what are you talking about? It's like, okay, yeah, your cheeks aren't sunken quite as far, or like maybe you're not explicitly killing a bunch of cops yet, but it's like visually, like when we're looking at you, you look similar already. So
I wish we didn't use it as this, Spider-Man, Iron Man, like suit of armor that he just kind of like turns on.
Yeah.
I would have liked to seen that struggle of like, I look like this. I'm like this hideous monster vampire. There's no coming back from that.
This movie should have been The Fly.
Yeah.
You know how like in The Fly where it's the slow transformation of Jeff Goldblum until he's like completely horrific. If you like truncate that timeline so he's truly horrific by like halfway through the movie, and then explored that more and about how he's still like a genius doctor or scientist or whatever, but inside of the like this monstrous form, would have been a way more interesting movie. But they were not at all interested in doing that. The script/story for this is like so thin, which is why before we started recording, I was like, are there even spoilers for us to really discuss in this movie? Because it's all like just pretty obvious. It's just like good vampire fights bad vampire, right?
It's very surface level, and like I know the directors commented that, he was like any of these guys, like he was hoping it does well, because the idea when they launched it was going to be another 2 to 3 films for the character. And I mean, obviously we've all known since kind of the first Spider-Man movie, we're kind of building to this Sinister Six, this big villain collection, which I guess I don't really get, this is where I'm going to jump to those kind of end credits. I don't really get...
Go for it.
Because we've spent this whole, like, and I get with an anti-hero, Punisher, anything like that, like, in comics, kind of the joy of utilizing an anti-hero is you can always flip them to be bad, to be good, that kind of thing. But I just spent an hour and 40 whatever minutes of you building Morbius up as, like, this good guy. And I'm not saying his character in the comics isn't good, but I just don't see him as... It's been a long time in the comics since he's been a villain, I guess, is what I'm thinking. Like, there's like 30 years of him just being this anti-hero and not villainous. So I don't get what would make sense for him to now, join a supervillain team of Michael, we get Michael Keaton at the end of this in the cutscenes, which I'll just say my complaint now. The movie was supposed to come out 2 years ago, so these cutscenes don't matter anymore because we've seen the movies that they were teasing.
Well, I don't think we did see the movies they're teasing, because in the first one you see the purple tear in the sky, which is the tear from No Way Home, right? And then
But
Michael
I mean,
Keaton
as the movie coming out now, everyone's already seen No Way Home. So if you had to see Morbius before No Way Home, you would have been like, what's going on here? Like, there's some there's some multiverse going on.
I saw it as like an explanation as to why the Falcon is the Falcon? No, the Vulture. The Vulture's in this movie. Yeah, it was just like, I saw that purple tear. I was like, oh, that's the No Way Home purple tear. And then he shows up, and it was just like, yeah, you got like, I don't know, Michael Keaton came in one afternoon last week, I guess, to film this shot because it looks like absolute trash, and it doesn't even look like at all like what we saw in the trailers. Like, that's the thing. This movie, like the last trailer I remember, it had Michael Keaton in the trailer for like half the trailer saying all these lines.
Yeah.
And he's not in the movie at all for any of this shit. He's in the movie for the 2 after credit / mid credit scenes, whatever you want to call them. That's it. And all of this movie's like marketing around like the Spider-Man graffiti on the walls and stuff like that, like all these references to Spider-Man. None of that's in the movie either. So this is like an egregious example of just like changing the trailers to try and get people that are excited about the MCU / Spider-Man to come and see this movie.
I know a big issue. I'd read an article that was basically talking about like when the trailer came out, the big negative reaction to the trailer was people were like, you're giving way too much out in the trailer.
Yeah.
And I know there was some sort of editing of the movie because then they took a freak out that, oh my god, we gave up all the good parts. But like you said, they essentially just cut them out of the movie.
I wonder if it was like ever like he was in there as like an integral part, because there's parts in the trailer, if I remember correctly, it's like Michael Morbius is walking out of somewhere and then he bumps into the Vulture and the Vulture's like directly talking to him or something. Like,
and I'm pretty sure it's they're walking
like,
out of prison. Like, I think he's
well, there you go then, yeah.
'cause I remember he's like handcuffed. I think Morbius is also handcuffed.
Oh, okay.
Which would make sense because it probably would have been during his whole prison thing.
Yeah.
Which is the other issue with, as someone that loves, some multiversing is I don't understand why this has to be in another universe than Spider-Man, because the end credit says this is. Because Vulture doesn't...
I know why it has to be, because these movies suck, and they don't want these movies in the same universe. The Venom movies suck, this movie sucks, like, comparatively to most Marvel movies. I know the Eternals is an outlier, but it's like, it's just they don't want this in the same universe, because it's like, you don't want this guy fighting Tom Holland in Spider-Man 5. It's just like they don't want it. That's why they want to keep it separately. And I think it's basically like in this universe, the Spider-Man's going to wind up being like Andrew Garfield, or it'll wind up being Toby, whoever will come back for the paycheck, I guess, right?
And that's kind of one of the issues, I think, is Sony not wanting to do that. And then I'm sure there's pressure from Marvel saying, listen, like, we know what we're doing. These need to all connect.
Oh, I think it's the other way. I think Disney does not want them to connect. I think Marvel does not want them to connect, because
I think Disney
they have
wants
their 25 to 30. Yes, Disney wants them to fail, which means they don't want them to be connected to like that universe, right? That's the whole thing. And like, this is spoilers for Spider-Man No Way Home, but I mean, come on, you've seen that. Everyone has seen that. Like, that's why Venom is only in the after credit scene of No Way Home, to leave the symbiote in the MCU world, right? It's like, it's not actually Tom Hardy's going to be Venom in that world. It's purely because they want to use certain characters in the MCU, but they don't want to deal with all of the baggage that Sony has created by making their characters in their other movie, right? It's like, yeah, they just want to take the Vulture because they have no plans for him in the future in the MCU, and he'd make, I guess, a good villain in this world, right? So they like swapped them, right?
Yeah.
Which is sad because I really like the Vulture as a villain in Spider-Man Homecoming.
I mean,
so to see him in here, it's like, oh man.
I mean, who doesn't want Keaton in their movie? So I mean,
Exactly,
you never know.
yeah.
Disney might just cherry pick. Say, listen, we need to borrow Keaton for a little bit. I was gonna say, back to Matt Smith for a second. So I'm not familiar. Yeah. So I learned that. So the character's name is Hunger. Apparently,
in this somewhere. Where?
Nope. Now I don't think they say that at all.
Okay,
I am
right.
trusting my fellow Facebook comic book fans, because of course after I saw it last night, I'm like, I want to see other. I don't care about the reviewers. I don't care about the critics. Critics usually shit on all these movies anyway. I was like, I want to see what people are saying. And I saw people being like, oh, like I thought Hunger was all right. Pretty good. And apparently he is like a villain in the Morbius world.
Okay.
I'm not familiar with him, but these were kind of my big issues with Hunger, with Matt Smith. Matt Smith as Hunger, when he turns into this character, looks way better than Morbius. I thought he looked far cooler than Morbius looked.
Yeah, Morbius looks like I don't know, it's like a bat. It's like almost like a blue bat. Like he's just weird looking.
I will say, like I said, that beginning shot of the transformation, that is what Morbius looks like in the comics. I will give them that. But for the rest of it, the CG was so poor, it never looked like that again. Where I think with Matt Smith, we got more time to kind of have him transformed, where it was a little more lived in. I thought he looked better. My other issue is it shouldn't have been Hunger. It shouldn't have been Hunger as a villain. It's fucking weird that it was just two vampires fighting each other. They should have had a different type of villain to me, because that way then all your vampire shit focusing on Morbius.
It's funny that that's an issue for you, because I actually liked that. And the reason why I liked it was because it winds up being they have this shared backstory as kids where they both have the same blood disease. And I was like, okay, cool. We're going to get the villain and the hero, when they fight at the end of the movie, it's going to be like two sides of the same coin. It's going to be like, look at the, if you went down this path. So I kind of like that. I didn't mind it. I like that they had a lot of backstory and kind of, well, not legitimately shared DNA, but you get what I'm saying. Like they're just well developed, I thought. Like I like that aspect, actually. I didn't really care. I mean, I get what you're saying, that it's kind of stupid to have two vampires fighting each other. But I did like that they were united as, like, kids, I guess, right? And they had this whole history together.
So, and this is where, like, I'm sure there's very complicated matters with rights. But when Morbius shows up, there's lots of times when Morbius shows up in the comics, we get, like, the Legion of Monsters is what they're called, which is, like, a weird Frankenstein and a weird Wolfman, and like it's basically like Universal monsters. I think Man-Thing is in it too. But I was like, you could have had something cool like that. To me, it would have been cool to have some sort of because in the Marvel comics, similar to DC comics, Frankenstein is almost like a mercenary, but he's Frankenstein. Like, you could have had, this vampire versus Frankenstein. Or, one of Marvel's most iconic characters, Tomb of Dracula. Like, we could have had, some sort of Dracula thing going on.
Which still would have been two vampires, though, if they did another Dracula.
I don't know. I was like...
Yeah, you were underwhelmed by it. I actually think that worked for me. I had no issue with that. I get what you're saying, though. Like, if there is, a pantheon of, other monsters, you probably could have had him working on, some sort of patient, or maybe having somebody else who had a similar disease that it affected them differently, instead of turning them into a bat, it turned it into something else. Or, you probably could have had still, what I liked, which is, a shared background and kind of, a shared, we both have these disorders that, need treatment. You probably still could have had that with a different character, I guess.
I just felt like we get shitty vampire effects over here, and guess what? We're just going to double down on those shitty vampire effects, and now you get two of them going at once, which is just a mess.
I do think it's really funny at the end of the movie that Morbius can control the vampires, but Matt Smith, who also would very much obviously have the same, be in tune with the vampires, I guess maybe has his skills for a couple days, less than Morbius, but he just gets completely eviscerated by all the bats at the end end of the movie, and I'm like, bro, like, you should know how to do this too. What are you doing? Just fight with bats. Have the stupid Harry Potter wand battle where the two bats are flying at each other or something. I would have got a good kick out of that. What do you think of Tyrese Gibson in this movie? I don't want to dunk on the guy too bad, but oh my God, man.
Hey, I didn't know he was in this, and I was like, oh shit.
Neither did I.
I was like, is that Tyrese? Man, it sure is. The other guy, I don't know who the other guy is, his partner. I didn't like, you know, I always like when they have like kind of that light character that's like, you know, he's nudging you like, yeah, this is what this movie you're watching. It's vampires. Like, and he's basically just like telling you before the movie tells you. This was the issue. And maybe, you know, maybe this is why we have 3-hour-long Marvel movies. There was just a lot in a short amount of time. Those characters weren't fleshed out at all.
It's like, do we need them really? Like, the other guy I just searched up was Al Madrigal, I think was his name, and it's just like, he was kind of like the comedic cop, and then Tyrese Gibson was like the serious cop, which is funny because like I know Tyrese from the Fast and Furious movies where he is always, you know, the comedic relief, and I think he does all right in those movies as being like charismatic and funny. So to see him in this movie as like deathly serious talking about vampires, I was like, bro, like, are you trying to be like a really serious actor now all of a sudden in Morbius? Like, I don't know, it was pretty strange.
Well, and you could tell like they were trying to jam story in there because they gave the whole like, I lost my limb and your blood or whatever.
Helped me.
Which I was like, this is cool if this is gonna lead somewhere, but it doesn't really. Like, it's like I said, it was just a lot of unfleshed characters. It was the same with like the female actor in it. I can't even remember her character's name.
Martine, her name is apparently Bancroft. I remember that name in the movie, but
that's how significant she was in it. Like,
I couldn't remember it either without consulting IMDb here.
And I get it. Like, Morbius in the comics, Morbius always has like some sort of love interest that dies, or like he's fallen in love with, is in peril. Like Morbius, you know, which I'm sure is pulled from the long traditions of vampire stuff. Like, he does always have that like romantic tragedy side of him.
Well, this was just very much like Dracula, right? It was just literally like once she drank of his blood, she becomes a vampire as well, right? Because when they kiss for the last time, she bites his lip, and it's very much like a chunk of his lip and some blood fall into her mouth. I was like, all right, bye. Like, let's wait for like the after credit scene when she's alive. But it's not even an after credit scene. They just do it like right before the end of the movie. I was like, all right.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, before we get into scoring this thing, I got to mention a couple of other small little things. I think they straight up rip off Batman Begins' score in this movie at a certain point. There's the point where Morbius, he steps into like the bat chamber and all the bats like swirl around him, and it's like showing that like they're friends with him or friendly or whatever. They don't attack him anymore. He's connected to them. I'm pretty sure like I would have to do a side-by-side comparison, but it was very much like Hans Zimmer, Christian Bale in the Batcave to me when I heard it. It sounded like identical. And I was kind of like, obviously both these movies were dealing with bats and men related to bats as superhero stuff, but I was like, dude, this like feels even like more than an homage. I want to see some sort of like reviewer do a breakdown. I want to see a side-by-side comparison of that. It was very similar to me.
I thought the music was a big miss. I don't even remember the score, but like I'm thinking about Venom, I'm thinking about the Spider-Man movies, then I'm thinking about Marvel at large, the Disney properties, and I think we've learned. What do people love in the Disney movies in terms of score? People love, Disney has really been able to say, hey, we're gonna get the license to one or two like super popular songs, and we're gonna play, and you're like, hey, that's, you know, Led Zeppelin in this movie or whatever. Which Spider-Man and Venom did this. They, you know, might get one song, it might even be an older song or a newer song, and you're like, hey, I know this song, and then it's just kind of in it. Where I thought this was an opportunity, like, you could have done something awesome, like, and funny for the viewer. Like, you could have got some, like, 80s gothic synthwave, so, like, The Cure, like, something that, you know, I just envision a guy in eyeliner singing, and, like, just anything to, like, spice it up a bit, which
it was the type of thing. No, when you were saying, like, this feels like a 2000s movie, I think I said mid-2000s, you were a little bit later. And I think, like, what this movie was missing to, like, completely fit that time era was, like, we needed, like, a new metal song. We need some rap rock in here. It would have been perfect.
I probably would have liked it better.
Yeah.
Because at least then I'd laugh, and I'd be like, oh, yeah, that's funny.
The other thing I wanna hop into real quick is just, in the final fight between Morbius and I guess Hunger if we're gonna call him that, Matt Smith's character, there winds up being so many shots of like just the camera is shaking so much and it's either way too close or way too far and it's all dimly lit and muddy where I literally couldn't make out anything. And I'm not like just being facetious or saying like, oh my God, it was so bad. I mean, like when they were kind of colliding into the buildings before they fall underground, there is like 4 or 5 shots that like I can't see anything. It's just all like spinning nonsense. Like it's completely washed out and completely like shit CGI that I'm like, I honestly don't know what's happening. And if you listen to like the music and stuff, there's supposed to be cues and I think there might even be some dialogue. I was like, this just looks like somebody took an image and just like blurred it and then just spun it. Like I was like, I have no clue what is going on here.
A lot of that stuff was off. I thought just the whole color grading in the movie was a little off. Like at the beginning, I was like, it was bizarre to me. Like there were spots that I thought, you know, when we get into his childhood, I'm like, this should be like really bright, but we just had like this dark grading over everything. Like we keep saying, I was like, this feels like something, yes, they would do in like the mid 2000s. Yeah. I thought we were kind of off this like terrible color grading.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that as well. Well, Rowan, should we get into rating this thing or?
Let's do it.
All right. So if you're new to the podcast and somehow stumbled upon our Morbius episode as your very first listen, then, well, thank you for listening and, you know, laughing along with us. But around here, our review rubric is nay, okay, yay, or slay. So, Rowan, what would you give Morbius?
Yeah, all I did was shit on this movie. But, I mean, I didn't have a terrible time with it. I would be interested to see where a story would go now that we've gotten rid of hunger, how we could further this story, I guess, maybe connect them to some things. So, you know, there was that to like. The shortened time was really appreciated. Like, you know, if a second one was this time, I'd spend that time to watch it. Also, you know, I briefly had mentioned I waited to see what other people were gonna think as they started coming out of the theater to this. And like, so, you know, on Facebook, I'm a member in one of the Facebook groups. It's like the largest comic book Facebook group in the world.
Okay.
Most of the comic book people loved it, you know, and I know we're a forgiving bunch.
I mean, most of those people love the Venom movies too. That's why those both do $1 billion, right?
We're all a forgiving bunch. You know, I'm the same. I don't care how bad it is. You're giving me an adaptation of a comic, so I'll go see it. But I will say, I do think it wasn't as bad as the professional critics made it out to be. I've seen far more egregious things that are, you know, way worse. Yeah, this would have probably been really good in like 2006. I'm gonna give it like the lightest okay possible.
Okay. All right.
I don't think it's like there's way worse comic book movies than this. Let's say this is probably the worst comic book horror movie. I prefer New Mutants over this.
I did as well. Yeah.
So I think if you're looking for a comic book horror movie, you're better off with New Mutants. I'll give it an okay in that hopefully better things are to come. I will hold out hope. I've never seen any of this other director's movies. I know he did Safe House, and he did that Life. He did Life.
Yeah, I've seen Life. Yeah, Life is definitely better than this. I feel like people
like that movie.
Yeah.
So I never saw it. We'll see. I know, like I said, this guy claims he has a vision. He claims he needs 3 movies to have this vision. We'll see. I'll really light okay. Wait till it comes out and you can just rent it or, you know, whatever you're going to do. Be like me and buy it for your Blu-ray collection. What about you, Colton?
Yeah, I don't want to see this guy's vision for another 2 movies. It's an A from me. It's not like the worst movie I've ever seen. It's not like, as our friends over on every horror movie on Netflix would say, it's not a nay with prejudice. It's just like, no, it's a nay. It's not a good movie. I'm giving it a negative review on Letterboxd. I think Matt Smith is one of the small redeeming aspects of the movie. And yeah, that's basically the only thing I thought was pretty good about the movie. All the other things I'd kind of like point to and what we discussed is kind of like where you would tweak the story or tweak the narrative to make it better, where it's kind of like, I could see where this could have been better. Maybe a lot of it has been chopped up and ruined over the last 2 years, but we'll never know, sadly. So yeah, it's an A from me. I don't hate the movie. Do I think a 15% is a bit harsh? Yes, it's probably, in my opinion, should be at like a 45 on Rotten Tomatoes, where it's a little bit more divisive, still trending negative a little bit. I'm surprised that it's like universally hated, but you
Release
know,
the
that's
Snyder
just
cut.
I don't know about that, but
it should be R. That's really the issue. They should have just went hard R.
I don't think that's the only issue though. I think you need more screenwriters. I think this thing needs to be rewritten. I think we need a lot more visual effects and stuff. It's, that's not the only issue. I do agree that is a big issue though.
Someone call up the Troll 2 guy. He's got a screenplay to write.
Hey, I mean, I'd go see that. But yeah, I mean, if you're this far, how about you head on over to one of our social medias? It's at It Slays Podcast everywhere. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. What's that other one? Slasher? Is that what
Slasher?
it is?
We're on Tumblr. Jeez, we're on everything.
Okay. So yeah, you can follow us there. We'd really appreciate it. And if you'd like to help out the podcast in another way, you can always head on over to patreon.com/itslayspodcast. Of course, you're not obligated to donate anything, and we wouldn't want you to do so at your own financial hardship. And we just appreciate you listening anyways. I think other than that, we do have the horrific playlist, which is over on Spotify, where, I think Rowan is the one that cultivates a list of jams nowadays.
It Slays Podcast Horrific Playlist. And yeah, I still gotta add a bunch of stuff up. I'm sorry, fans, but I won't be adding any music for Morbius.
Dude, I can't even remember anything other than, like I said, that discount Batman Begins track. But yeah, I think that just about does it for us on this episode of Now Slaying. So I'm Colton.
I'm Rowan.
And we'll see you all later.
We're going to expand our weekly video segment to take you into the back shelves of your local video store. Back where it says horror videos and where kids are devouring some awful films that we call the video nasties.
Are you freebasing? Inquiring minds want to know.
I have to break free from this culture of mechanical reproductions and the thick incrustations dying on the surface.
Fuck the prime time, bitch!
Not with the new flesh.
The pain, I can assure you, will be exquisite. As for our deaths, come with me and be immortal.
We have such sights to show you.
We've got to return some videotapes.